All right, let's take a look at your own AYP chart. The first question asks you about your 2012 growth API and how did you do on that? Well, here's how you'll find it. If you take a look up at 11 and 12, you'll see API change, and XYZ school between 11 and 12 gained 39 API points. You can also see that their subgroups, the Hispanic subgroup gained 6. Socioeconomically disadvantaged kids, those are kids that get on free and reduced lunch, gained 38 points. Their English learners gained 72 API points. For our purposes, we're only interested in adequate yearly progress in what comes up for this number right here, school-wide. It's 39 points. So we go back to our form on 2A, and I want you to look at your own form and see what you have. But XYZ school at this point, I'm going to write down 39 points. So please look at your own and write down 39. The plus is just a mistake on my typing there. And while you're writing that down, take a look over here, the 212 county mean API gains. In other words, what's the average gain for an elementary school in Riverside County on the API? And the average gain was 6 points. The average gain for a middle school is 14 points. The average gain for a high school was 7 points. This gives you an idea of how you compare to other schools across the county. The next question is, did you make your school-wide API, yes or no? Well, I think you already know the answer to this. The answer to this one is yes. If I could circle it, I would, but I can't. So you guys go ahead and circle what your response is. Let me show you where you can find it. Well, you can tell that's a green mark for API, so you know you made it. But right here it says, did you meet your 2012 API? The answer is yes. So that's why I circled the yes, and that's what I'd like you to do right now for your school. Okay, and you can see on the screen here that I've highlighted the numbers and the responses that I've put on there. In terms of school-wide API, the question is how many other elementary schools made their API in 2012? The answer is 77%. Again, you can see the middle school and the high school. What percent of them also made their school-wide target for API? The next question on your record sheet asks, how much have you gained since 1999 on the API? Well, in 1999, XYZ school had a 523 API. They moved to a total right now in 2012 of 746. That's a gain of 223 points on the API from 1999 to 2012. So I'd like for you to find out what this number is for your school and record that on your record sheet. Okay, so I'm going back here to put 223. And you can see I put the 223 here, and let's compare XYZ school to the county means. Elementary schools since 1999 have gained 214 points. So they're just slightly above average when it comes to how much they've gained on their API. The next question on your AYP record sheet is whether or not you've made participation rate. And as you can tell on the 2012 participation rate for ELA, it says yes. And for math, it says yes. For XYZ school, they have yeses in both areas. So they're going to record that on their record sheet. Okay, and you can see that I've marked it here on the form. I'd like you to do the same thing. That is not an issue. Most schools make their participation rate. It's very, very rare that a school misses their participation rate. Back in the early 2002, 3, 4s, the high schools had a problem making participation rate, getting some of their all of their subgroups there. But that changed after the first couple of years. As you know, one of the elements for making, or one of the things you need to look for in your making percent proficient is your school-wide percent proficient. And right here you can see that in ELA, English Language Arts, school-wide, that XYZ schools scored a 41.5%. It was below 78.4, and we'll describe why and why they got a green here, even though they were below this number. We'll describe that in a second. And you notice they also have a green marker here at 56.6. That's also below 79, but the bottom line is when it comes to school-wide math and school-wide language arts, XYZ school made their percent proficient. So we'll want to record that in our form, and we'll talk about how they were able to do that and not make the annual measurable objective. So you can see here that on the form, they've made proficiency school-wide in English language arts and in math, so we've highlighted, in this case, both the yes. So please do the same for your particular document. Okay, you remember I told you that the school itself made their percent proficient with this low score here. You'll also notice, for example, that the English learners were also able to make their percent proficient, which is 39.9% of their English learners. So what's going on here? It's a concept called safe harbor, and basically you don't necessarily have to make the annual measurable objectives of 78.4 as long as you are showing a consistent amount of growth. So it's called safe harbor. Let's talk about how this subgroup, this English language learner subgroup, was able to make safe harbor and therefore make the percent proficient target. Part of the key to understanding safe harbor is to make sure we understand where this English learner subgroup was in 2011. Notice that only 27.3% of their English learners were proficient in 2011. So basically what we have to do is reduce the number of non-proficient students by 10%. And if we're able to do that, then we make what's called safe harbor. Here's how it works. Okay, how to achieve safe harbor at XYZ School for English learners in English language arts. Again, the concept behind safe harbor is that you reduce the percent of non-proficient students by 10%. So you've got to find out how many students are not proficient. Well, if you take 100%, and if you recall from looking at their APR, about 27% of those kids were proficient. So if you subtract 27 from 100, there's about 73% of their kids, that are, in this case, they're English learners, that are not proficient in ELA. So basically, what we're saying, if we reduce the percent of non-proficient kids by 10%, 10% of 73 is about 7.3%. That means 7.3 more English learners need to be proficient in order for the school to make safe harbor for English learners. So in other words, another way of looking at this is to think of 10% of 73 as 7.3. Or if you want to see the mathematics itself, you can take a look here and it shows you that if you are able to reduce the number of non-proficient kids by 7.3 points, you can make safe harbor. Well, what does that really look like in real life? Well, remember, last year in 2011 at XYZ School, about 27.3% of their ELs were proficient in 2011. So, and 7.3% more need to make safe harbor in 2012. We add these together and we come up with a target of 34.6. So XYZ School makes proficiency for English learners in English language arts in 2012 through safe harbor with a score of 39.9, because that's what they actually have. They exceeded this 34.6, so therefore with the 39.9 they make safe harbor and therefore make the percent proficient for English learners in English language arts. Okay, so that's a brief description on the safe harbor. By the way, it's actually a more complicated formula than that, and you can actually make safe harbor with a lesser score than that. But for our purposes, that describes how these groups were able to make their percent proficient with scores lower than the annual measurable objective. In our next video, we're going to take you through each one of your significant subgroups and find out why some of these subgroups here don't have any colors at all, and then help you analyze that. That's in the next video, so stay tuned.